Every mission has a story, and every story starts with the people behind the work. This is Under the Surface, a video series where we explore the voices driving innovation forward here at NSWC Carderock. Isaac Bertramsen didn't always imagine he'd end up here, but every step has led to something meaningful. He'll share his journey from Navy sailor to mechanical engineering grad and discuss how embracing failure, choosing the hands-on path, and staying true to his strengths helped him build a career on his own terms. So, let's dive in.
Welcome, Isaac. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So excited to get to know you and a little bit more about what you do here at Carderock and kind of go under the surface. So let's go ahead and get started. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your title here at Carderock.
Sure. My name is Isaac Bertramsen, and I work for the Dynamic Measurements and Testing Group here at Carderock.
Nice. And we're going to go ahead and start off with a little bit of your background information. So, growing up, was there anything that kind of first introduced you to engineering? Were you always like a science, STEM type of kid, or how did like the interests get piqued?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and I hero worshiped my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran. And my mom always said that when I was growing up, I had three options when I was getting out of high school: join the Navy, or join the Navy.
Okay.
So I wound up joining the Navy.
Okay.
And I served there for 4 years as an aviation electronics technician. And when I was getting out of the service, I had already enrolled to go to college to use my GI Bill. My university, South Dakota State University, offered an electrical engineering program. And I always thought, well, if I could be a technician, I could be an engineer. Nice.
Okay, so you served your 4 years, and then while you were still serving is when you went to school, or was it afterwards?
Oh, no, I got out fully. And then I went to South Dakota State and earned my degree separate from the Navy.
So you earned your bachelor's in
electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering, okay. And then what kind of happened after that? How did you then make your way to Carderock?
It was a journey. I went through some hard times. I didn't have the greatest GPA, and because of that, people would only hire me as a technician because of my work experience as a technician. And then 2009 recession occurred, and I lost my job, and that was actually like a really big defining moment for me, because I realized that I made my own definition of what is a success. So I wound up giving up on my dream of being an engineer, and I wound up being a collections representative for the IRS. Okay. And then,
very different from engineering, I can assume.
So different, but it was interesting because it wound up being, I discovered something about myself there, which was I loved fixing problems.
Okay.
And whether it was a person's financial problems or just fixing electronics, that's when I ran into that scenario of like, I love fixing problems. My wife got a promotion, and she had to come to DC, and I found on USA Jobs technician for a Carderock Warfare Center.
Okay, and that's how you first heard about Carderock, and now you've been here. So when did you officially start at Carderock? What year was that?
April 20th of 2015.
Nice, okay.
So I just celebrated 10 years.
Yes, well, congratulations. That's a big milestone.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been able to see a lot of, growth within the command, and I'm sure even within your own department over the years, and just the work that you're doing. Let's go ahead and get a little more into that. So what exactly do you do as a technician here at Carderock?
So I first started working with 653, that code, and then I transferred after about 4 years into 663. And what I actually do is I place the sensors and the instrumentation on the test articles that are going to be tested, whether it's strain gauges, accelerometers, velocity meters, pressure gauges. I do all of those different kinds of instrumentation, different kinds of sensors, whether it's from my home or whether it's here. Everything that I've experienced in my 48 years of experience have all kind of come to a focus. And like having the experience as a collections representative to even when I was in the service, you know, like everything that I've done has allowed me to be better at what I do here.
Definitely, yeah.
So,
yeah. What would you say is, so like taking your experience from your time in the service, then also working with the IRS and now being a technician here at Carderock, what would you say are some of the similarities or some of the things that you've taken from those previous jobs that now you use like in your everyday work here?
So a lot of things are like the intangibles. Like I can walk on a Navy ship right now and know where I need to go on that ship, where like a normal civilian just coming out of like college would be like, I've never been on a ship before. I don't understand forward, aft, port, you know, like, what do you mean when I say like, oh yeah, I was on the O10 level, you know, they'll be like, I don't know what that means. It means those 10 floors up, looking down. You know, like it's...
The terminology. Right.
Exactly, you know, it's all those things of just being able to, like, as far as like a collections representative, you know, if you're having a very high stressful evolution, you know, I can compartmentalize to the point where I'm like, okay, look, yeah, I've got 101 things going on at home and everything else like that, and this engineer really wants us to get this test going right now, but right now I'm about to take this detonator and stick it into a brick of C4. I kind of need to focus on where I'm at right now and not talk about anything but other than how am I being safe, am I doing the job right, and making sure that everybody goes home. Right,
definitely. So compartmentalizing and kind of focusing on what you need to, when you need to make sure that you and everyone else is safe, definitely. Would you say that was like something that you had to like kind of like train yourself, like a trained and like learned skill, or was it something that came a little more natural to you?
Oh, I am a very impatient person, so learning patience, learning to be meticulous with like, you know, like a lot of times you're sitting there going like, oh man, I just can't wait to get to
the end result.
The end result, but you've got a lot of meticulous steps that you must execute every single time, and to have that patience and to really just kind of like dial in to that focus and just let the noise of like, oh yeah, I got to get those orders in and I got to do that and I need to fire off that email, and so like, oh, it can wait.
Yeah. Kind of letting like the waves die down and you're just kind of there with your project or your work and doing what you need to do.
And you have that moment where all the noise of your life just kind of goes away and you can just focus on like the flow of solder as it's going up a wire, or you know, just making sure like, okay, is this acceptable to the level of standards that we need to be at?
Definitely, definitely. So going back a little bit about what you do, would you mind explaining exactly your role as an engineering technician?
Engineering technician. So usually what happens is an engineer will come down with a test plan. Okay. And then the engineering technician will take that test plan and take the test articles that we're going to do and instrument the test article with the way that it's specified. So the engineer might be busy doing 200 other projects, but you're sitting there getting that test article ready to go so that when we go to do the test, we get all the data that the engineer is looking for.
Got it. So you're doing a lot of the behind the scenes work that probably people don't think about in, you know, in hindsight, like bigger picture.
Right. You're going to see like, oh, these people did a test. And they came up with some really cool data that is going to make the warfighter better. But what they don't maybe talk about is oh yeah, that guy laid over 200 strain gauges and over, 10 miles of wire to make sure that all that data came
and was correct.
And when we do testing, my testing specifically is explosives.
Okay.
And how quickly and dynamically that happens.
Right.
And our testing is a very, 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 very small window, like super short window. And you need to be able to be exact with all the data points. And there's no, oops, hey, can we retest?
Right.
Yeah, no, we just destroyed the test article.
Yeah.
And it's a one-shot take.
Definitely, yeah. So I can assume it's a little nerve-wracking leading up to it because you only have one shot.
It's interesting is like it's not really nerve-wracking. It's just, again, the compartmentalization of where you're just like, I can't think about anything else, and I'm just focused on the task. And with the meticulous work that we do, we're always checking, rechecking, reading everything out, so that when we get to that test, we are 100% confident that we're going to get the data that we need to get.
Right, and that everything will run smoothly.
Right.
So I can assume your attention to detail is probably amazing.
When people say, oh, I have a really great attention to detail, and I'm like, when's the last time you cleaned your glasses?
Right. It's the little things that sometimes people don't realize. But yeah, I can only imagine. I know, at least for myself, that I would definitely be a little nervous going into things like that. But I'm sure you're so used to it after doing it for so many years.
I still will miss some things. But the greatest thing is that the coworkers that I have and the team that we have, we work well with each other, and we make sure that everyone is looking out for each other.
That's great. So you've been at Carderock for 10 years. You just
Yes.
celebrated your 10-year anniversary here, which congratulations.
Thank you.
What would you say is like one of your proudest moments, or a project that stands out, or multiple projects that stand out to you that you've worked on throughout the years?
Sure. Well, when I was working for the statics measurements group, I had to go to Bahrain 10 times.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Going there and back 10 times was really interesting. It was very hot, obviously. But there was one time that they received a huge downpour rain, and the sewer system was backed up. Okay. And so like all these sailors had to build like this little bridge of pallets, and then they posted a couple of sailors, and so we come oiling up and like with all of our test equipment and tools and everything like that, and these sailors have to they would come over and be like, okay, we're going to go ahead and like one would just grab it and start walking through the water carrying our toolbox, and then like another, like the engineers would start walking across the pallet bridge that they built for us.
Oh wow, that's insane.
Right.
I can only imagine like the
parking lots were like filled, and like the water was up like to the car doors.
Is it just because like they weren't used to that amount of rain since it's usually so hot? Yeah.
Well, and also Bahrain builds every year. Okay. It creates more landmass by draining out sections of the Persian Gulf, and then that becomes like a new part of their country.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
That's how like Dubai was built.
Oh, okay, interesting. That's a fun fact. I did not know that.
I got to do that with Carderock. Also, last April, I got to go to Australia and do explosive research with the Australians and their warfare department.
That's amazing.
And in between both of those crazy things, I did a small little test called the CVN-78 shock trial.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
So every time that a new class of ship enters our fleet, we have to test it to see what its actual ability to handle shock is. And so we'll instrument a ship, and we'll set off a couple of very large charges next to the ship, record the data, and then that allows us to come back to the scientists and engineers that build the next iteration of a ship with data on how to make the next ship better and more survivable than the last ones.
Nice, interesting. Okay. And so were you living on the ship while you were during the trial?
Oh, we were on the ship when the shock events occurred.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so what is that like? What's that experience like?
Well, it's, if you've ever been to sea with a bunch of sailors, you understand that it's a different way of life.
I can imagine.
There was a lot of hype and a lot of misinformation because, as a sailor, I can say, we tend to gossip.
Okay.
And some of the gossip was completely misunderstood or totally
Wrong. Right.
Wrong. Yeah, they were really worried that the ship was going to sink. And I'm like, guys, we're going to be here for this. And they're like, wait, you're going to be on the ship too?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're collecting the data for this ship.
Right.
Shock,
Yeah. So I'm sure that like in those moments, it's probably like a proud feeling that you get, especially because you were former Navy. And so then like being able to come back and be with those sailors and basically teach them like, hey, this is what I do. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about it. But like you were in their shoes at one point,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was interesting for sure. What's really fascinating to me is the time jump for me was almost close to 20 years.
Wow.
From when I was in to when we did the shock trial, or I'll do the math later. The interesting transition was that people change, but the sailors stay the same. There's no change, and it may have been 20 years from when I went back, but immediately I knew the lingo, I knew who was in charge, I knew who was what and what was what.
Yeah,
so.
And I'm sure that's like, it becomes second nature, I'm sure. Yeah, and my dad, he served 20 years in the Marine Corps, and like they say, once a Marine, always a Marine. So I can only imagine for you, it was very like, I'm sure bittersweet in a way to be able to kind of go back to where you started.
And that's one of the major reasons Chris Miller once said, remind yourself why you work here at Carderock. And that struck home to me because, I work at Carderock so that I can make things better so that more sailors can come home safe to their families.
Exactly.
And that's what, is one of the main driving forces.
Definitely. The mission, at hand, definitely. And I think sometimes for people who don't know what we do here at Carderock, it can be like a little confusing and kind of hard to explain, but I know that for myself, I always try to remind people that, the work that maybe personally I'm doing, with public affairs or writing stories, they may not understand how it may tie into the bigger picture, but like you said before, like all the little things, they all tie back in some way, shape, or form. So definitely like big picture and making sure that, at the end of the day, we're thinking about the mission, and that is to bring, our sailors home safe.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So over the 10 years that you've been here, how would you say your role as an engineering technician has evolved?
So one of the things that I didn't quite understand when I came on was that it takes about 5 years for a technician to really train up to the point where they are 100% a fully autonomous technician. So when people start working here, I'm like, listen, we're not we're not a job. We are a profession. And the craft that we learn takes years to perfect. It's not someone can just pick this up and 2 weeks later be doing exactly what I do. It's a craft. We have people that are, journeymans and masters, and and you experience that, where after about 3 years you think that you know everything, and then after about 4 years you're like, oh, I don't know anything. And it's only about after 5 years of really doing pretty much everything that you do at a work group that you finally realize, you're like, okay, now I'm comfortable, now I feel confident. And so I really try to encourage like the people that are like just coming on, like, hey, this isn't 2 weeks you're going to have everything mastered. So
right, yeah.
Patience
And taking your time. What would you say was like the hardest thing for you to kind of like learn throughout those like first 5 years here?
How meticulous our work is. Like even just putting down certain kind of sensors on things, it's a process, it's an evolution. It's not just a lick it and it's stuck and send it on its way. It's a very meticulous approach onto how you're doing it, because the data that we're trying to collect is a very difficult to obtain kind of situation.
Right. So with the experience you've had, and then obviously, being able to kind of mentor new engineers that may be coming in, what would you say is your biggest piece of advice for them?
So my biggest piece of advice for them is to take opportunities that are presented to them. Even if it's a job that nobody wants, to take it and then to really put their best efforts into it. Because what they may not see is that is the test of like, well, if you don't do your best for a job that no one really cares about, how do I know that you're going to give your best for a job that something everybody cares about?
Right. So it's really obvious that you're very passionate about the work that you do here as an engineering technician. What, aside from your work, what would you say is your favorite part about working at Carderock?
The people, obviously. I mean, the myriad array of peoples and their backgrounds, and just the way that we all buy in to our mission. I've never seen anyone who's like not about the mission. I've seen people that are not about the work, but the mission as a whole, the buy-in is 100%. Everyone here is a firm believer in what we do and how we do it.
Which I'm sure makes, working here just that much easier. Being able to know that you're on the same page as everyone. Right,
and then that translates into another really great thing about working in the dynamic measurements group is that it doesn't matter if you're an engineer or an engineering technician, whether you've been there for 20 years or whether you've been there for 20 days. Everybody has a buy-in. Everybody is given an opportunity and a voice. And if someone, and it doesn't matter if it comes from the 20-day-old or the seasoned veteran, if someone comes up with a way to do the test better, we execute and we follow through with that. And to me, that's one of the breathtaking parts about working in the dynamic measurements group.
Definitely, I think because, sometimes when you start a new job or even career, a lot of the times the newer people may be overlooked.
And shunted to the side.
Right, because they don't maybe have enough experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure for those people, we've all been there at one point. At some point or another, whether you've been here for 20 years or like you said, 20 days, we all started somewhere and we were all that new person, that new hire at one point. So I'm sure they really appreciate being able to like have their voices heard and know that they're going to be able to like be valued in what they do here.
One of the engineers told a group of students that were working here for the summer, and he just looked at them and said, all right, day one, you guys are in. So now it's up to you to earn your way, so to speak. And it's not a go sit there and read these books. It's a grab that tool bag, we're going out to work.
Right, and being hands-on, I'm sure, is probably one of the most important aspects of the job because, again, like you said, you can't read this stuff in a book and learn how to do it. It takes time, but I'm sure then being able to execute it and be there on the grounds with the experts and learning from them firsthand is probably makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. There's a lot of times where I'll just look at my up and coming engineering technicians and I'll be like, all right, lay the strain gauge. I'm here if you need any questions.
Right, yeah. And if they mess up, then you're there to be able to guide them and help them. And
failure is one of the best teachers that we can ever have. And one of the things that I learned at Carderock is that failure isn't a desired option or outcome, but it is an outcome. And what's important is how you fight through the failure. The quick saying is testing can be testing.
Definitely. And I think that applies to life as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had said before, you, in your journey to before Carderock, you were in a profession that you didn't go to school for and that you didn't plan on, but you ended up, landing here and being where you want and kind of measuring success. You had to kind of change your viewpoint about what really is success, right?
Right.
And so along the path of success, sometimes to be able to reach to that point, you're going to have some bumps in the road and there's going to be some failures, but it's about how you take that time and experience, learn from it, and then do better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've talked a lot about your career and your time here at Carderock. Aside from all the amazing things that you're doing here, what do you like to do outside of work? Do you have any hobbies, any personal interests?
Well, I love to cook for my family.
Nice.
And like to watch the British Bake Off.
Okay.
But
are you into baking more than cooking, or is it like half and half?
It's just
split?
more of a love of I don't love to cook. I love to eat. So I love to cook the things I want to eat.
I feel that 110%. I'm the same way.
But outside of that, I spend time with my family. We all play Dungeons and Dragons together.
Nice.
And then I go to the climbing gym because my daughter's on a climbing team. So we go and do wall climbing and bouldering.
That's interesting. Okay. Do you only do it like indoors, or have you done like outdoor climbing as well?
So have you ever seen National Treasure 2?
Yes, I love that movie.
Okay, so you know that lake where they go in to reach their hand into the eagle?
Yes.
Okay, we actually went there, and my daughter got to rock wall climb out there at that beautiful lake.
That's so amazing.
And then we also went climbing at New River Gorge.
Okay.
So yeah, we've done a little bit of outdoors, but mostly we try to keep it inside.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, wow, that's so cool. I can only imagine how much like training and skill that must take to be able to do that. I'm
not very good at it, so
was that something that she got interested in on her own?
Yeah, she decided that she didn't like what she was going through in soccer, and we were like, you have to pick a sport. And I took her to that climbing gym once when she was 5, and they actually came up to me and said, how soon is she going to be 8? Because we would like...
They saw the potential in her. That's so amazing. Okay, and so how old is she now? How long has she been doing this?
She's 15. She's been on a climbing team for 3 years, and she's nationally ranked.
Wow, that's amazing. Congrats to her.
Yeah. It's all,
I'm sure.
all her, you know?
Proud dad.
Right.
Yeah. So cooking, climbing, is there anything else that you enjoy doing?
Dungeons and Dragons
Yes.
and painting the miniatures for my table and everything like that.
Nice. Again, with the art, being very articulate, the attention to detail from your career definitely all ties back.
Even when we're doing like stories and Dungeons and Dragons, and you know, like I'm weaving adventures for my table, it always fascinates me to make the background and the motivations for what is happening to them, and that translates to me in the real world, where I'm always interested in finding out about people and where they're from and how did they get to where they're at, and
Their story.
you know,
Right.
it's their story. And it's always fascinating that everybody has this beautiful journey that they've gone on to get where they're at. And it's, you know, sometimes you're just walking down the street and you're like, I wonder what their background is.
Right.
I wonder what their story is.
I always find that so interesting. And being able to sit here and highlight your story has been such a pleasure. So thank you so much. I appreciate it, Isaac, and thank you so much for being able to go under the surface with us.
You're welcome.